future trends, deep insights, industry leaders. This is the iGaming Next podcast with your host, Karolina Pelc.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Solutions, the leading iGaming PAM platform with a modular approach, including many benefits like a fast, secure, and scalable API-based platform, integrated with all major third-party products and services. Make sure you head over to Pragmatic Solutions and join our smart thinking.
Hi, everyone. This is Karolina Pelc, your podcast host for iGaming Next. I haven't been here for a while. The startup life has taken the better of me, and my frequency of podcasts has not been the best recently. But I've got today Francesco Borgosano with us, who is the CEO and co-founder of Huddle. And with Huddle releasing very exciting news this week, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to jump back in and start my podcast all over again. So, hi, Francesco. Lovely to have you here today.
Hi, Karolina. Yeah, thank you for having me. And actually very excited, double excited to be like the first host after a bit of a break for you. So honor about that.
Absolutely. And I think it also kicks off my plan that I had for a while, because I really wanted to switch the focus of this podcast towards more sort of VC-oriented subjects, startup-oriented subjects. It's something very close to my heart, obviously, at the moment. So I'm excited. You're my first guest. Now, there has been a lot of press the last yesterday, actually, but I would want to start with reiterating the big news of Las Vegas Sands, one of the biggest, or the biggest gaming company in the world, investing money into Huddle. So tell us a little bit more about this big deal.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great time. It's very exciting, especially, as well as a co-founder and CEO, the closing of a financing round is always like a key moment. It's a moment when you get validation about your vision and validation about what you've done so far, and at the same time you get the fuel that you need to move forward and keep chasing the vision that you set up the company after. So I'm very happy personally, as I said, as a co-founder, but in general for all the hard work that came into this from the team, and in this case, given the merger, as you said, because this is actually a bit of we moved away from the traditional, let's say, startup path. We closed our seed round in 2020, but then, as we progressed over time and we were going after our Series A, we actually had the opportunity to meet the guy at Deck Priz. I had the opportunity to meet in person Ed Miller and Matthew Davido, the founders and CEO and COO at Deck Priz. And given the complexity of the ecosystem and given the challenges on building a startup in our industry, we really felt that this merger made sense for both companies. There are like a lot of synergies in terms of like people, technology, vision, and then of course that was validated by the investment from Las Vegas Sands, which again for us was very important because as you mentioned, is a big name and it's a very well recognized brand in the iGaming industry. So having the validation from the investment of Las Vegas Sands is going to help any conversation moving forward. Talking to potential customers, potential partners. So that's why we're very happy about the way this round happened with the merger and then investment of Las Vegas Sands.
It's something to be super proud of. I've been following your journey. Obviously, I'm good friends with Leo, and we've been sort of exchanging founder tips and challenges for a while now, and that's how I met you, Francesco. So, really amazing news for you. Can you tell me just a little bit more about, because I think this is something people asked when the news came out, is this investment similar to sort of Leo Ventures, for example, investments where they invest in exciting companies, but the aim is to remain on your B2B path as planned?
No, actually, in this case, and that's something that it was important for us. Las Vegas Sands, in that regard, is treating this investment as a proper, financial institution. Like the investment, as you know, they divest their B2C activities in the US with a sale or their properties in Vegas to Apollo. And they're now very much focused on their international B2C business. They don't have any, activity in the sports betting. So they're looking at this space purely as a financial investors, which is good for us because, we still leverage the brand and the recognition the Las Vegas Sands, but it still leave to me and the rest of the leadership and executive team a bit more freedom from a business development perspective, from a strategy perspective. So no, it's a traditional VC investment from because I don't know, but there have been a couple of announcements made by Las Vegas Sands. They already done a few other investment in the space, and basically last year in July, they created this investment arm. So no, in that regard, they're like a proper financial investor.
All right. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that because it's always interesting. And yes, all their investments are interesting, and this definitely started to making some moves. Now, I wanted to start sort of putting the focus a bit more on Huddle, even though in the investment and the name of Sands is exciting. The purpose of the podcast is to give the founders and the business the spotlight. I wanted to start with your experience. You've got some amazing credentials behind your name. I think a lot of people know that previously you were chief analytics officer at Kambi, but further down, you also have amazing brands like, the Stars Group and BetStars, as well as Ladbrokes. So tell me a little bit more about sort of the career journey and the moment that you decided to co-found Huddle, and how did this all come together?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I feel a little bit old once you list all the companies that have worked at. Yeah, I'll say now this is like my 10 years in this industry. So I've been in industry for about 10 years now. And as you alluded to, I started working for major B2C. So my first role was for Ladbrokes. And I came in the industry actually with a very strong technical and quantitative background. My first role was a quantitative analyst. So I was responsible for building predictive models and algorithms for Ladbrokes that at the time was developing a proprietary technology. And throughout my career, I basically followed the traditional corporate career. I started as a quant, evolved as leading the quant team eventually for Ladbrokes, then moved to Stars Group, which was very exciting because it was actually the first time that I got exposed to a company, because Ladbrokes was very much focused on sports betting, oldest bookmaker in the world, a lot of heritage, important name, but very much sports betting only. And then with BetStars, it was very interesting because I got exposed to the online poker business, and it was a proper multi-vertical company, so that gave me exposure to other part of the iGaming industry like poker and casinos. And then in 2018, which something that we're now seeing in the US, but in Europe, there's been kind of a consolidating trend starting, I'll say, 2014 when Ladbrokes and Coral merged, and then so on and so forth. So in 2018, I wanted to move on the B2B side because my intuition was that there was a bigger opportunity as a B2B provider, and there was a lot of legacy technology and a gap that could be filled working in the B2B space. So I joined Kambi, who is, of course, a market leader as a B2B provider. And I would say in the corporate, that was probably the peak of my career. As you mentioned, I joined Kambi as a chief analytics officer, so that was my first executive role. But I was still in a phase where I was very much a doer. I wanted to do something, and of course, Kambi as an established business with a very large customer base and a very large operation to support and maintain. So I felt that I couldn't really have the impact that I still wanted and I still believed I could have. And then, timely enough, the PASPA was repealed, and Leo, that you mentioned, one of my co-founders, joined a startup in the US called SimpleBet. So he approached me, he called me, and I was, very intrigued by the opportunity of joining a startup and working in a more dynamic environment. I also had the chance to move to the United States, so get exposed to the investors community in the States. So that's how I jumped into the startup world. And then after a few years at Simplebet, again, I felt that the direction of the company wasn't necessarily aligned with what I thought was the biggest opportunity in the space. So we decided to go our own way. At that point, we actually had expanded our network with the VC ecosystem in the US. So we decided to start our own company and founded Huddle in November 2020. And here we are today.
What's the story behind the name? Why Huddle?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the story behind the name is that it's actually come from so my favorite sport when it comes to US sports is American football. So, the huddle is the moment where the players come together before each play. And for us, that's a moment, when there are, like, say, two key aspects behind the name. There is one internal aspect, which is basically the togetherness and the unity of the team. And then the second aspect is the strategic, because the huddle is the moment where you define the strategy and how you're going to move forward and how you're going to play your next play. So I think those two were the two kind of like key factors that we wanted to translate in our brand name.
I love the name. I actually came across this name when we were looking to rebrand, and I was like a bit gutted that it was taken. So
yeah, it's difficult because there are other technology company called Huddle, so it's going to be difficult, but hopefully we're going to be Huddle in 2 years from now.
Exactly. Right. Something I wanted to ask you now, we've got these interesting times now where LinkedIn posts are screaming at us about the upcoming recession and the impact on startups, and all the sort of VC influencers advising founders to keep a tight ship, that this is not the best time to raise money and the funding will be drying up. You have got big tech companies making massive redundancies across the world, and yet here you are, not only in an industry that it's sort of resilient to recession to a certain extent, but we never know how it's going to be in future. But also in a environment where, especially in the US, there are so many sportsbook startups, right? And we talked about it a little bit, whether the environment is driven by startups or VCs that want to invest in them. So I wanted to get your view on that, but also what's the success formula? Why have you managed to secure this investment? What was so unique about how you guys thought the vision for the company through?
Yeah, a lot of interesting point in the question. I'll start from the first aspect, and I think you're totally right. And for sure, I would say, unfortunately, startups are going to be casualties of this kind of like macroeconomic trends, and that was, I would say, my experience as well during this fundraising, because the sports betting industry is a new industry, especially in the US. So there's still a lot of learning to be done from the investors community. I think one of the biggest challenges for startup founders today is the fact that we are looked through the lens of the financial market. So, if you are a founder today and you want to start a startup in a sports betting, the first thing the investor is going to say is like, oh, well, but look at the share price of DraftKings, look at the share price from Candy, look at share price from GAN and Genius. And I mean, the list, it's of course very, very long. So it's difficult to make an argument on why you as a startup, with all the challenges that a startup has, you're going to make money in an industry that is bleeding at the corporate level. So, which again, in my opinion, is not necessarily the right way of looking at the startup, because of course, each company at each stage has different problems. But I don't think it's necessarily true that because those large corporate are suffering, then you as a startup are going to suffer the same. You're going to have different problems. We're going to have different problems, which is, you need to scale, you need to hire, you need to maintain the culture, build a product, deliver product to market. But I think this is a disconnect that there is in the market. So that's definitely an issue for startup, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be still the case for, I would say, the next year or two. But at the same time, and you're right, I think the sports betting industry in particular is one of those industries that is less affected than others, because, PASPA is still only 4 years, so it's still like a kind of a growing and emerging industry in the United States. And of course, sports is part of the culture of I would say, each part of the world, but especially in the US, it's a kind of a social cultural thing. So there's still room to access capital, and that's why we're seeing a lot of startups in the sports betting industry. However, I think there's still an unbalance between supply and demand. You were asking about if it's a VC driven or a startup driven. I think at the moment the supply of capital is not big enough to have a startup driven ecosystem, in the sense that, especially in the US, I would say there are two main group of investors. You mentioned Leo Vegas. There are others. Largest, there's like DraftKings has its own VC, exactly, Drive. So I would say you have the strategic investors, which of course are these large corporate that need to diversify and potentially de-risk their business. So they see that investment as sort of like a R&D type of project. If you do well, they're going to put you in the wrap of the overall business strategy. But then when it comes to the actual proper VC, I think there's still like a very small pool of investors around sports betting. And especially in the US, most of those VC are connected to each other. So they are usually the one driving the narrative, and they have certain hypotheses that they feel strongly about. So usually they're the one driving the direction of the startups, and startups that they get funded, which I don't think is necessarily a great thing for the industry, in the sense that, as I said earlier, I still believe that there's a lot that investors need to learn about the. I mean, you, like myself, you are a founder that has been working in the industry for quite some time, so you understand kind of the nitty-gritty of operating a casino or operating a sports book, and I don't think necessarily investors have that full grasp and knowledge, because it takes years. I mean, after 10 years, I still have a lot to learn about.
Sure, of course.
About operation, and so hopefully once the market recover and the supply of capital increase, we will shift a bit more toward the founders and really having this innovative spirit around the industry. But definitely the US is a fresh air for the industry compared to Europe. And this is something we talk with Leo and you, I'll say off the record, but we actually tried back in the days. I think it was around 2015 or 2016. We actually had the Huddle vision already at the time, and we wanted to pursue that vision. And it was very difficult for us to raise capital in Europe because the mentality of investors is very different. You have mostly private equity and growth stage investors, so there's no really this approach to risk investment like a startup can be. So in that regard, the US is a bit more open to risk and a bit more startup friendly. So I would say there are challenges in raising capital and creating a startup, but definitely we're moving in the right direction.
Right. So, if I was going to ask you about a couple of tips that you give to other founders that are in fundraising mode right now, what will be your favorite one, or the one that actually made the biggest difference for you guys?
Yeah, I think that the one tip that I have, and I think for us was actually probably the biggest challenge when we were doing our fundraising is to actually talk about your vision. Like, especially I would say as a first time startup founders, we're always like a bit not skeptical, but almost kind of paranoid. Like, maybe we shouldn't say too much about what we want to do. Like, we should be careful. And, like, we don't want to give away our secret sauce or whatever. But actually, I would say the more you talk about your vision, and the more, especially at an early stage, the more you talk about your vision, the more you have the opportunity to talk to different perspectives, even people that may not have necessarily the same expertise that you have, but they look at it from a different point of view. It really have challenge your assumption and really polishing your proposition. So I think talking to as many people as possible is probably one of the most important thing that you can do as a startup founders. And also, I'd say, especially for me, was also like a great learning lesson. If you are a technical founder, sometimes, and that was definitely my mistake, it's something that I improved over time, sometimes you get stuck on the solution rather than on the problem. Because you know so much about the thing that you want to build. So when you pitch your startup and when you pitch your vision, you very much focus on what you want to build and why you want to build it and the technology that you're building and why you think the technology is going to be amazing. But at the end of the day, that's not the right way of presenting your startup, because at the end of the day, what the investor wants to understand is the other way, is the problem. Like, they really want to understand what's the problem you're solving, because understanding the problem means understanding the market that you're addressing, understanding the audience that you're addressing. So my advice would be, if you're a founder, yes, of course, you need to explain why your solution makes sense, but try to focus more on the problem that you're solving and why that problem is important in the industry.
Do you think there is a... Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, you go.
No. and then the last tip, I think, which, again, was, I'm very happy. One of our co-founders is Jesse Bachtel, who is a serial entrepreneur, not from the industry, but he has experience in building SaaS company, and he had a couple of successful exits. I think having someone close to you or in your team that understand how to negotiate venture deals is also very important, because there are a lot of technicalities and aspects that may kind of like bite you back down the line if you don't structure the deal in a proper way. So that was something that we wanted to make sure to do that properly. So we brought Jesse on board since early days as a co-founder. So having someone that can help you negotiate the deals is an important thing.
For sure. We've got one internally as well. I mean, this is all very new to me. So, while I'm pretty confident on the vision and the actual negotiating skills, there are some certain intricacies of fundraising that is a never-ending learning journey. For new founders as well within the industry, do you think that there are opportunities to attract a completely non-industry related investors? Because we've got a pretty well established ecosystems with strategic investors in the likes of operators or big corporates. We've got angels within the industry. We've got VCs, Alpha, Better Capital, all kinds of well-known sort of organizations providing funding. But is the industry too niche and too specific to be able to convince sort of outside of investors completely on the problem? And sometimes it's hard enough to explain the problem to people that worked in the industry. Like in my case, I spent a lot of time trying to explain multiplayer technology for slots. Trying to explain to someone that has never been to the casino or played online, I find it an impossible task. But in general, do you think founders should be casting sort of narrow and aiming for the industry only for a higher chance of success, or they shouldn't just look internally, maybe also look at outside?
Yeah, actually, I believe, and it's something that I was alluding to earlier, I actually believe that pool is expanding. especially because, and that's, by the way, is also tied to kind of like why I wanted to start Huddle and tied to the Huddle vision. I think with the US market, there's going to be now a bigger focus on the technical challenges that this industry is facing. And that will open up inevitably. And you can see that now with companies like Verizon and this large tech giant started looking at the Amazon last year. I remember when they were experimenting with like live streaming for their football games. So I think as the industry and the VC and investors start growing their awareness of the technical challenges and the technical complexity behind this industry, I think that will open up the opportunity to access capital not only from the usual names as you mentioned, but actually from more traditional Silicon Valley and technical investors. So I think I would say probably today is not yet the case unless you are solving. For example, there is a startup that I followed in the past, and I believe they do like great job called Phoenix. They're developing this like live streaming technology for like low latency streaming, and in their case, it would say easier maybe to pitch to a technical investor, but maybe for us, like on multiplayer casino, social casino, or a more efficient data solution for sports betting is still probably too early.
Yeah, I understand. If you don't know what's the inefficiency, then it's hard to pitch the solution to that, right? We touched a little bit on trends in investment, which takes me to the question, as a startup, as a thought leader, and also an innovator in the space, what is your view on the big trends in the industry, and where is it going in the next 5 years?
Well, we saw that already in Europe, and now it's continuing in the United States with this consolidation, and the M&A activity hasn't really slowed down since, I said, probably 2015. So I think the consolidation is still gonna continue to reach that economy at scale, especially in the US, where the operating costs are becoming very, very significant, and where, especially in the sports betting, there is a lot of bleeding from a financial perspective. So I think we're still going to see a lot of consolidation going on. From a product perspective, it's interesting to see a bit more focus on the kind of like user engagement and customer experience. So kind of building this more immersive experience rather than the traditional kind of like transaction experience, especially for sports betting.
Higher entertainment value. I like.
Yeah, so I think that's refreshing. I mean, even if, let's say, I come from kind of like old school type of sports betting experience, so I don't necessarily need that experience. If I gamble, I know what I want to do, so I don't need any entertainment when I interact with the sports. But I can see why young generation or new users may want to have that, and that kind of lead to the other trend, which I think is very interesting and is going to add a little spice to the industry dynamic. Seeing all these media companies entering the space, like DAZN and Fubo TV, Fanatics, and I think that will probably shape up the industry in the long term. And then there is, of course, the biggest elephant in the room, that is the online casino, which at the moment is lagging behind from a regulatory standpoint. But of course, when online casino, and in my opinion, it will in the next 5 years. Like, I think once online casino get regulated, that will definitely change the entire dynamic, because that it's a way higher margin vertical, and most likely that's what's going to drive who's going to be the winner in the long term, because sports betting has been historically more kind of an acquisition channel, and it's more of a way of attracting customer and grow your customer database. But then the actual profit and margin is made on the casino. So I think that's going to be a big shift of the industry once online casino get regulated.
Yeah, I'm bullish on the last one, of course. I think there's much more to come from the gaming industry, and I think it's going to be a big wave of startups as well. As you said, I mean, there are two types of ideas. Some are aimed at solving existing problem within the existing demographic and their usage patterns, and that's great. But also, nobody needed an iPhone in the times of BlackBerry, right? Especially in the business demographic. And eventually it did take over, and it brought many more sort of additional revenue streams for the phone makers. Now, the last subject I wanted to cover, which is something that, again, we talk about often, and I think it's important to share those lessons and findings, when it comes to building a startup from the ground up. I'm obviously at a much earlier stage of the journey. We're now like 15 people, which I already find slightly overwhelming. You guys are up to 80, and I think you've got offices in few places around the world. Your tech hub in Croatia, where you guys are very active in the startup community and very successful with recruitment. So well done on that, because I find it extremely hard, the tech recruitment. Now we've got offices in London and now Las Vegas as well. So tell us a little bit more about the main obstacles of building an organization to this size, and how do you manage your workforce split geographically like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely the biggest challenge that we face, in the sense that, when we start Huddle, and I have to say it's the same for Deck Prism, that's why kind of like it's reassuring and we have confidence for the future. Building the proper culture was something that we were adamant about, and something that was probably our top priority along with the vision. So we spent a lot of time building that culture, building the right mix of young talent and experienced professionals who could balance that off and channel that energy of these young people coming in this industry. So the culture has always been a priority. Of course, as you said, it is a challenge, and because we have multiple time zones, multiple locations, different skill set, different background. So we had to sacrifice a bit of agility to favor a bit more structured process. We spend a lot of time in daily stand-ups, constant communication and alignment. And while, as I said, it comes to a cost, because you spend a lot of time talking rather than doing, we believe that's the only way to ensure that you can maintain the culture. And as I said, yes, you pay something in terms of efficiency, but at the same time you gain a lot in terms of alignment, in terms of also engagement of people, because retention is also very important for a startup, because you spend time and you invest time and money in growing these people, growing these resources. So and we're lucky, because so far we haven't lost anyone, so fingers crossed that will continue. And I think that's because we have this culture, that's because everyone knows what's the contribution, what's the value, and how they can make an impact for the company. So yes, we do that with a lot of talking and writing, and we use a lot of tools for collaboration and planning and strategy. So that's how we cope with this like large organization.
I think that there's a lot of little nitty-gritty details that people don't realize, because, for example, we are fully remote, so that gives us advantage to really cherry pick some of the best people, regardless of the location, and they also can move to different places, which makes us a preferred employer for them. But with that, it comes so many challenges, as in different tax jurisdiction, different cost of employment in different countries, different treatment of equity rewards. I mean, try to get a company-wide travel insurance where you've got people in 9 different countries. I mean, I just face these decisions every day. And to be honest, some of those, they don't actually have solutions because being remote or geographically distributed is quite a new concept. I mean, in the scale, because companies used to have 2, 3 locations, but they act as separate entities. When you're one company with people everywhere, it's just hard. So there's pros and cons, I guess.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, the operational side, yes, I didn't touch about that, but yes, on the operational aspect of building this company, it's hard. And my advice that for startup founders in general is, and again, it's a trade-off because it's not cheap. But we basically knew very early on that we had to almost structure the same as an enterprise. So we had we retain early on, big four when it comes to accountants and corporate advisors, and just to deal with all the things that you mentioned, taxes, payroll, benefits, because it's you really need like a professional support for that.
You know what I find the biggest challenge in companies that are remote or they have sort of offices in different countries? The water cooler chats. And that also goes for hybrid companies where people work from home. And we have an event coming up next week in Poland. And I was just thinking we have to cover so many subjects, do some collaboration, whatever. But actually, I realized that we need to spend the most time on facilitating water cooler chats, because that's the one thing you really can't replicate on Zoom, is a casual conversation where people just talk about random stuff, because it feels forced when you do it online, right? It's not natural walking over to someone and picking up on yesterday news that it's the same for everyone. So I think when teams have a chance to come together and just discuss random, totally not work-related things, you should facilitate it as soon as possible, as often as possible, because that's what builds the relationships, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I have to say, this is kind of going back to what I was saying, like my background when I was at Ladbrokes. And in that regard, I'm a bit old school in the sense that I'm aware, and I don't think there is any. I think the pandemic has been just an accelerator, but I think the trend of remote working was already there. And I think the remote working and in general, like hybrid and more flexible working is going to be the standard in the future for future generations.
Elon Musk would disagree.
Exactly, but I have to say, same for me. I come from, and I started in this industry, and for me that was very exciting. Like I was at Ladbrokes. The entire company was in the headquarters. Like we had an entire building. It was the Ladbrokes headquarters, and for me that was great, because as you said, you would just go in the office every day and you just talk not only with your team, you just walk around the floor, you go to the kitchen, you interact with people working on all sort of things, marketing, finance, legal, wherever. So I think that human interaction, yeah, you're totally right. It's something that it's very difficult to replicate in this hybrid remote working. And personally, something that I miss, that, as you said, there are pros and cons. So as long as you put in place the right thing to address the issue, I think the hybrid is going to be a good way forward.
Francesca, I'm going to start wrapping up because we're nearing the time that we try to keep the podcast to. I have a very last question for you, which is, if you were going to identify one major milestone, which is your next big milestone for the company, what would it be?
I think the big milestone that we have now, I would say there are two milestones. There is one, which is the technical integration between the two systems that we have built separately within Deck Prism and Huddle. So really leveraging that synergies that we've seen during the diligence process. That's the biggest internal milestone. And then I would say externally, I think winning a tier one customer is going to be our biggest milestone, because we have great customers and we're very happy with the traction that we had so far, and we have been able to prove the quality of our product. But as you know, this is like a small industry, so I think once you get on board that one customer that has that broad recognition, then everything will kind of like snowfall after that and make easier to kind of like roll out your product on a larger scale. So I think winning an important client is the next milestone that we're after at the moment.
Okay, well, I'm gonna follow this closely, and all the best of luck with that. Thanks very much for your time today. Congratulations again to the whole team and yourself and your partners. Amazing news this week. And yeah, I hope to speak to you soon off record.
Thank you, Karolina.
Thanks.